My wife begged me to face the brother who terrorized me as a child. People change, she insisted. Minutes later, she backed away and shouted, "Call the police, he's trapped him." For 10 years I had no contact with my younger brother, Dustin. I did not speak to him, attend events where he was present, or allow relatives to pass information between us. It was not punishment. Distance was the only way I had ever felt safe from him. Dustin had been violent for most of our childhood. Sometimes his anger had an obvious cause. I touched something he considered his or said something he took as disrespect. Other times, he seemed to enter a room already looking for someone to blame. Our parents, Joan and Arthur, tried to help him. They arranged counseling, changed his school, and spent years searching for treatments that might control his behavior. Nothing lasted. After every serious incident, my mother cried and reminded me that Dustin was struggling. My father promised they were handling it. Then everyone waited for me to act like we were still a normal family. By the time I turned 18, I was exhausted. Before moving out, I told my parents I would continue seeing them, but Dustin could not be included. My mother looked devastated. My father asked whether I wanted to make a permanent decision while I was angry. "I'm not angry," I told him. "I'm done being afraid." They eventually accepted my boundary. For the next decade, it mostly worked. I saw my parents separately. They did not invite Dustin to gatherings I attended, and they were forbidden from giving him my address or phone number. Years later, when I met Tessa, I did not tell her everything immediately. The truth came out gradually. One evening, she noticed a scar near my shoulder and asked where it came from. I told her my brother had caused it during one of his violent episodes. At first, she assumed I meant a normal fight between siblings. Then she saw my face. "What exactly happened?" she asked. I gave her the simplest version I could. As our relationship became more serious, I told her enough to understand why Dustin would never be part of my life. She knew about his unpredictable anger, the years of fear, and the way my parents kept convincing themselves that the next treatment would change him. Tessa never questioned me. One night, after I woke from a nightmare, she sat beside me and said, "You never have to see him again. Not for your parents. Not for anyone." I believed her. We married and later had our son, Levi. My parents were allowed to tell Dustin that I had a wife and child, but they could not share photographs, contact information, or anything that could lead him to our home. For years, our life remained peaceful. Then my father called. "Your brother is being released next week," he said. I already knew Dustin had been in prison. My parents had told me when it happened, although I had asked them not to give me regular updates. He had served a little over a year after another violent incident, and was being released on parole. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. "He's different now, Graham." I closed my eyes. My father had used those words before. "He completed several programs," he continued. "He's taking responsibility. Your mother and I want to have one family dinner." "No. You haven't heard the details. They don't matter. We're only asking you to consider it." "I already have." My father tried to continue, but I ended the call. 2 days later, my mother contacted Tessa. I found out that evening after Levi was asleep. Tessa was sitting at the kitchen table with an untouched cup of tea. "Your mother called me," she said. "About Dustin?" She nodded. I expected her to tell me she had reinforced our boundary. Instead, she said, "She truly believes he's changed." My stomach tightened. She has believed that before. This time, he's been through treatment while he was away. He had treatment before. He wrote letters to your parents. He admitted he hurt the family. He didn't write to me. Maybe he doesn't know how to approach you. He doesn't need to approach me. Tessa stood and moved closer. "I'm not suggesting we let him into our lives. I'm talking about one dinner." "No. Your parents would be there. They were there when I was a child." She flinched. "That isn't what I meant." I gave my father an answer. "You didn't even consider it." "I spent my childhood considering whether I was safe around him." "I already know the answer." She said she understood what had happened. I told her she understood what I had described. She had not lived through it. The conversation ended, but the subject did not. For the next 2 weeks, Tessa kept returning to it. She said my parents were getting older and carried guilt over how our childhood had unfolded. She argued that Dustin might no longer be the person I remembered. When sympathy failed, frustration took its place. She asked whether every holiday would have to be arranged around my refusal to see him. She said Levi had an uncle he might never know. I reminded her that the arrangement had worked until everyone decided my boundary was inconvenient. One night, after another argument, I asked why this mattered so much to her. "Because this affects all of us now," she said. "Your parents have to divide the family. Levi may grow up wondering why. This is about making holidays easier? No. It's about giving your family a chance to repair itself. And you think I'm preventing that? I think you might regret never finding out whether Dustin changed. I'll regret it more if I find out he didn't. She looked at me and said, I'm willing to take that risk. It isn't your risk. We would go together. That still doesn't make it yours. She explained that the dinner would be at my parents' house. There would be no alcohol. My father would watch Dustin closely, and Dustin knew that one outburst could violate his parole. Every reassurance depended on him behaving rationally. Eventually, I gave in. Part of me wanted the arguments to stop. Another part feared that refusing would create a permanent fracture in my marriage. There was also a small, unwanted part of me that wondered whether Tessa could be right. Before agreeing, I set one absolute condition. Levi would not attend. Tessa had originally assumed he could come because she believed the dinner would be safe. When I refused, she mentioned how much my parents wanted him there. If Levi goes, I don't, I said. She stopped arguing. Her parents, Vera and Walter, agreed to watch him. I also told Tessa that if Dustin became threatening, I would leave immediately and never attend another event where he was present. Then I warned her about what she was asking me to risk. If he comes after me, I'm going to resent you for pressuring me into that room. Her expression hardened. That isn't fair. You know what he did. You've seen the scars. I'm not forcing you. You have spent 2 weeks asking after I said no. I'm trying to help you. Then understand what I'm telling you. If this goes badly, don't act surprised. She folded her arms. I think you're expecting the worst from someone who finally changed. She sounded certain. I wanted her to be right. On the night of the dinner, we left Levi with Vera and Walter. During the drive, Tessa reached for my hand. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. You can still decide not to go inside, she said. Would you leave with me? She hesitated. That told me everything. When we pulled into my parents' driveway, I turned off the engine but did not open the door. Tessa looked at the house. People change, she said quietly. This might be the night you finally see that. I did not answer. My mother hugged me when we entered. My father promised everything would be fine. Dustin was already sitting in the living room. I had not seen him in 10 years. He looked older, but not as different as everyone had claimed. His hair was shorter, and there were new lines around his eyes. The way he watched me had not changed. Graham, he said. Dustin. He stood. When he took a step toward me, I moved back. His mouth tightened. My parents had told him about Tessa, but this was their first meeting. She introduced herself. Dustin smiled at her. Thanks for convincing him to come. I looked at my wife. She looked away. Dinner began quietly. My mother filled every silence with harmless conversation. My father changed the subject whenever tension surfaced. Dustin talked about the programs he completed while incarcerated. He said he had learned to recognize his triggers and understood how his behavior had affected the family. Everyone waited for me to respond. I acknowledged that I had hurt him, but I did not offer forgiveness. Eventually, Dustin put down his fork. So that's it? What do you mean? You're not going to say anything? My father intervened. No one has to discuss anything before they're ready. I'm only trying to talk to him, Dustin said. He looked at me again. Do you still think I'm the same person? I don't know you anymore. I'm your brother. We haven't spoken in 10 years. Because you decided I was some kind of monster. The room fell silent. Tessa placed a hand on my knee. I could not tell whether she was comforting me or asking me to cooperate. I came because Tessa asked me to, I said. I'm not here to argue about the past. Dustin gave a bitter laugh. Of course not. You'd rather sit there looking afraid so everyone feels sorry for you. My father said his name sharply. Dustin ignored him. I was a kid too. You act like I planned everything that happened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. His voice rose. My mother looked at me with panic in her eyes, silently asking me to calm him down. That expression took me back to childhood. Dustin became angry, and somehow preventing the next explosion became my responsibility. I pushed my chair back. I'm leaving. Tessa stood beside me. Dustin rose too. So you came here just to walk away? I came. It didn't work. I'm trying to apologize. No. You're asking me to make you feel forgiven? His expression changed. He moved around the table and stepped between me and the doorway. My father stood. Dustin, move. Dustin kept his eyes on me. You walked in here treating me like I'm still dangerous. You're blocking the door. Because you won't talk to me. Move. Tessa's voice trembled. Let us leave. Dustin glanced at her. For the first time that evening, she looked afraid. My father stepped between us and placed a hand against Dustin's chest. Dustin shoved his arm away. My father stumbled into the table, knocking over a chair. My mother screamed. Dustin turned back toward me. I retreated until the wall stopped me. Tessa backed away and shouted, "Call the police, he's trapped him!" My mother froze. My father was trying to regain his balance. When neither of them moved, Tessa pulled out her phone and called emergency services herself. Dustin raised his hands. "Don't," I said. He stopped a few feet away. Maybe he heard Tessa giving the operator the address. Maybe the approaching consequences finally reached him. My father grabbed his shoulder from behind. Dustin spun around and nearly struck him before stopping himself. Sirens sounded outside moments later. The officers separated everyone and took statements. My father had a bruise forming along his side but refused medical treatment. Because Dustin had blocked me from leaving, advanced toward me after being told to stop, and shoved my father, he was detained pending a parole review. He was not immediately given a new sentence. He was taken back into custody while officials investigated the violation. I was not physically injured. That fact seemed to comfort everyone except me. My mother cried in the driveway. My father looked exhausted. Tessa was shaking so badly that an officer asked whether she needed medical attention. She said no. We drove away in silence. When we collected Levi, Vera asked how the dinner had gone. "Badly," I said. She looked at Tessa but did not ask for details. At home, I checked every lock. Then I stood beside Levi's crib and watched him sleep. Tessa entered quietly. "He's safe," she whispered. I nodded. She reached toward my shoulder. I moved away before she touched me. Her face crumpled. "I'm sorry. You knew. I didn't know he would do that. You knew he was capable of it. I thought he had changed. You decided my experience wasn't enough. That isn't what I meant to do. It's what you did." She explained that my parents had sounded convincing and that Dustin's treatment and parole had made her believe he would remain calm. Her apology kept turning into a defense. I told her I was sleeping in the guest room. "For how long?" she asked. "I don't know." The next morning, my father called. Dustin was being held while his parole violation was reviewed. Then my father began minimizing what had happened. "He lost control for a moment." "A moment? I'm not excusing him. You're already reducing it. He's still struggling. He can struggle away from me." My mother called later. She admitted Dustin had frightened everyone but insisted one outburst should not erase every step he had taken. That was how my parents had always survived loving him. They made each incident smaller until hope could fit around it. I told them not to discuss Dustin with me again. For the next several days, Tessa and I spoke only when necessary. She apologized, but whenever I said I blamed her for pressuring me to attend, she became defensive. "Dustin chose to act that way," she said. "I didn't." "I know. He is responsible for what he did. You are responsible for ignoring me when I told you he was dangerous. I thought I was helping. You thought you understood him better than I did. That's not fair. I'm talking about safety, not fairness." She had no answer. The distance between us grew. I still loved her, which made it harder to understand what I was feeling. I would see her caring for Levi and briefly recognize the woman I had trusted completely. Then I remembered the weeks she spent convincing me that my fear was unreasonable. I could not relax when she touched me. It was not a punishment. My body pulled away before I could control it. One night, she stood outside the guest room. "Are you going to punish me forever? This isn't punishment. Then what is it? I don't feel safe with you." Her face went pale. "I would never hurt you. You didn't have to do it yourself." She began crying. I said I was sorry. "I heard you. What else am I supposed to do? Understand what you're apologizing for." "I apologize for pushing you. You're sorry because the dinner went badly. If Dustin had smiled through the evening, you would still believe you were right to ignore my boundary. But he didn't. That is the point." She sat on the edge of the bed. "I wanted your family to have a chance. You wanted a version of my family that made sense to you." Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. "Before I made it a firm condition, did you intend to bring Levi?" She looked away. "I assumed he could come." My chest tightened. "You believed Dustin was safe enough to be around our son. I was wrong. If I hadn't refused, Levi could have been in that room. But he wasn't. Because I protected him." She flinched. I hated how satisfying it felt to say that. I did not want to win against my wife. I wanted to trust her again. The next day, I told her we needed marriage counseling. She looked offended. "Over one mistake?" I stared at her. "That is how you see this?" "That isn't what I meant." She said counseling made it sound like our marriage was falling apart. "It is," I told her. Not because Dustin lost control. Because she had treated my first-hand experience as something she could overrule. She agreed to attend, although reluctantly. 2 weeks later, we sat across from a counselor named Fiona. I explained Dustin's history, my years of no contact, the pressure to attend, and what happened at dinner. When I finished, Fiona asked Tessa what she believed the central problem was. "Graham blames me for what his brother did," she said. I shook my head. "Dustin is responsible for his actions. I blame Tessa for repeatedly dismissing my decision not to be near him," Tessa replied. "He eventually agreed to go." Fiona remained calm. "How did he reach that agreement?" Tessa hesitated. I kept asking. "For how long?" "About 2 weeks. Before that, did Graham express any interest in attending?" "No." "Did he tell you he believed Dustin remained dangerous?" "Yes." Fiona paused. "What made you trust his parents' judgment over his?" Tessa stared at her hands. They sounded certain. Dustin had completed treatment. I thought Graham was reacting to the person his brother used to be. "You believed you were seeing the situation more objectively?" "Yes." Fiona asked what she thought my boundary was protecting. "My emotional health," Tessa said. "Was that all?" Tessa looked at me. "No. His physical safety too." The room became quiet. Then she said, "He told me his brother was dangerous, and I decided I understood the situation better than he did." It was the first time she admitted it without immediately defending herself. That did not repair the damage, but it was the first thing she said that made me believe counseling might help. Fiona asked what I needed from Tessa. I said I needed her to stop using good intentions to minimize the consequences. I needed to know that when I identified someone as unsafe, she would not treat my boundary like a fear she had to cure. Most importantly, I needed her to stand with me if my parents ever tried again. Tessa promised she would. I wanted to believe her. We have now attended 3 sessions. Things at home are calmer, but they are not normal. I moved back into our bedroom. There is still a distance between us that neither of us knows how to cross. Tessa told my parents that Dustin would never be allowed around Levi and that they could not pressure us into another reconciliation. My mother called her harsh. I called her clear. My father still believes Dustin can recover. Maybe he can. I hope he does. I simply will not risk my family to find out. Tessa says she understands that now. Some days I believe her. Other days I wonder whether she truly understands or has only learned what to say in counseling. She keeps asking whether I will ever forgive her. I keep giving her the only honest answer I have. I don't know. Maybe counseling will help us rebuild what was damaged. Maybe it will only help us identify the moment our marriage changed. My brother made his choice at that dinner. My wife made hers before we arrived. I still cannot decide which choice caused more damage,